Joining us now is former Labor Minister Stephen Conroy. Stephen, good to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us as always. So what are your thoughts on this plan? Is it expected?
Well, look, I think Labor needed to set out its broad agenda. Probably the most difficult moment that I had as a commentator during the last election was watching the press conference where Labor, Bill Shorten, Mark Butler were asked questions about the costing, and they said, you know, we don't know the costing. The costing of not doing anything is significant, and we have some proof of that over the last 3 months. But I think this gives Labor the chance to work through all of the details it needs to do. It needs to find the right balance of short-term policies that are going to ensure electricity prices don't go up, that sectors are protected, and that we have legitimate action to move towards renewables, which the vast majority of Australians want to see. At the same time, the risk of today is that the government will attempt to claim that Labor have no idea what the cost of their policy is, or worse, they're hiding, or worse, that they're hiding the cost of their policies because they're afraid to tell the Australian public. I think Albo's given himself enough time by announcing a broad strategy now to work those issues through well before the next election.
I think you're onto something, re the attack line from the government there. We've seen a taste of that already this morning. But, you know, this should be expected by Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party. So are you expecting, do you know, if we will get some of that extra detail that just wasn't there during the election campaign?
Well, I think Labor have suffered a terrible thrashing. And I think I heard Mark Butler say this morning on radio that, you know, we've lost 3 elections in a row. We've been committed around this policy for 3 elections in a row, and we've gone backwards in seats in Queensland, and we've gone nowhere in seats in Western Australia. These are the 2 states where Labor has to have more than just an inner-city green agenda. If we don't develop a broad policy base that appeals to both regional working Australians and the traditional inner-city base that Labor has attracted, though that has been taken over the last 10 or 15 years by the Greens more so than in regional and rural Western Australia. So Labor has to get that balance right. We've given ourselves the time to develop and flesh out those policies. But if we were to try to go to the next election with the same strategy, which is to have no costings, then I suspect that that will cop the same sort of caning that you saw in the last federal election.
Stephen, are you expecting, you know, things like electric motor vehicles, is that going to come back into play again, and all the relevant arguments for and against that are going to be associated with that?
Well, look, the attack on electric vehicles was quite frankly hypocritical and preposterous. If you look at what the government themselves had put money into, had announced, and then you've just got to look at what's happened since Boris Johnson got elected. Boris Johnson is talking about phasing out diesel petrol cars over a period of time. I don't see Scott Morrison attacking Boris Johnson because he's moving down that path. Now, Australia has a much different geography to the UK, so it's not a simple transplant of ideas that you can do here. But there are all sorts of developments that will take place in the next 3 years, which I will suspect will make this government look stupid if it attempts that ridiculous attack on the electric car development.
Yeah, look, the electric car issue is a different kind of thing altogether, and they had such a potent attack line at the last election, though, that, you know, now we look at what
no one's building Holdens anymore in Australia.
No, that's
so
right.
let's just settle down.
Well, given what the UK's just announced as well, you know, it is achievable, but it's a completely different political environment here. I mean, net zero emissions by 2050, the last UK election was just a non-issue at all, and this has been an issue.
It's a non-issue. It's a non-issue for the New South Wales Liberal government. It's a non-issue for the South Australian Liberal government. I mean, these are developments since the election that Scott Morrison cannot deny. I mean, if Gladys can do it, if Marshall can do it, then the federal government have got a lot less potency in their attack.
But how do you convince so you raise Queensland. How do you convince the people, and particularly miners, that their jobs are going to be protected? I mean, Matt Canavan's already tweeted today, net zero emissions means net zero jobs, which could be an effective argument up there. So how do you turn that around, in your view?
Look, you've had the Business Council come out just in the last couple of weeks saying that there is a investment boom waiting when we start addressing this issue more seriously. I mean, this is the Business Council of Australia. I mean, Matt is an incredibly effective politician, and I've said to you both, he belongs on the front bench, and the government are stupid to have him on the back bench. But having said that, the business community, the insurance community, the airline community, like big business wants this resolved, and they are saying that there is an investment surge waiting. And an investment surge waiting means jobs. So Matt can keep banging that drum, but Matt knows that he has to move forward with the times, as well as getting the balance right. So Matt's job will be simply to criticise and at the same time encourage a bunch of renewables, as well as his dream of a coal-fired power station. But other Liberal Party governments are going to go down this path, and it will make it harder for Matt and harder for Scott Morrison to make these arguments going forward. And as long as Labor fleshes out the policy more than it did at the last election, I think it'll be able to put together a very credible position.
Well, we'll see. We'll see the detail later this morning. Stephen Conroy, thanks so much for your time.
Good to be with you both.